fact, you can do your sport because you're short,
I think she's short-ish.
right?
Yeah.
It relates, so.
6 foot.
I don't know, interesting to think about. We're going to continue talking about how hormones generally act, and we'll get back to growth hormone and how it actually acts in a few minutes. But when you talk about hormones, one of the most important endocrine organs is the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is in the brain, and it's considered an endocrine organ. And if you've got slides that you're writing on, I took off the extra words over here because I decided, oh, you don't really need those. But I want to point to where hypothalamus is, which I cannot do because I am short. That's ironic. Okay, I'm going to jump. Get ready. This right there. You see where I touched? That's the hypothalamus. So maybe label right there that triangular wedge of tissue in the gray. That's the hypothalamus. Other things that you need to label here. What is this thing? It's close. It's close. This is the pituitary. This is the pituitary. So it starts with P. We'll look at it on the brain models tomorrow. Those are two that you need to know for lab. And the reason the hypothalamus is so important is that it controls the production of other hormones. So the hypothalamus makes hormones, and its hormones control the production of other hormones. So it's a master regulator. And this is a really important definition of a type of hormone called tropic. Tropic. Tropic hormone is any hormone that causes production of a second different hormone. So the purpose of a tropic hormone is to get another second hormone to be made. And the hypothalamus makes a lot of tropic hormones, and thus it controls production of other hormones. Yeah.
Is it a different hormone or the same?
It's a different hormone. So it doesn't cause more production of itself so much, but it causes production of another one. And we'll look at some examples really soon, if not right now. Okay, so I want you to know generally for endocrine organs, what hormones do they make? What hormones do they make? And the hypothalamus makes a lot of different hormones. Two of the ones that the hypothalamus makes are not tropic. And those are the ones that are being referenced here. So these are hormones that the hypothalamus makes, and they act to do things on target cells. And they are oxytocin, which is related to, let me write that out here, labor, like childbirth labor, not National Labor Relations Board. Labor, childbirth, breastfeeding, and emotional attachment. Labor, childbirth, breastfeeding, and emotional attachment to other people and probably pets. Those are roles of oxytocin. So your hypothalamus makes that. It's not tropic. It does all those things on its own. This one, antidiuretic hormone, we talk about that when we get to kidneys. So don't worry right now about what it does. It's made in the hypothalamus. It affects your kidneys. And we cover that with kidneys. Yeah.
Did you say that the oxytocin, that stuff that you wrote on
Yeah.
the that's for that?
Yes. Never be afraid to clarify, like, what are the extra words talking about. That's what oxytocin does. It's a bonding hormone, as well as starting labor and allowing breastfeeding. Yeah.
What is tropic mean?
Tropic. So tropic means that the hormone causes other hormones to be produced.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. These two hormones, oxytocin and this is ADH, is its abbreviation. They're not tropic. So they do things, but they don't make other hormones be produced. They're not tropic.
And you said that it's in the kidney?
ADH acts in the kidney. Yeah. But we'll learn that later on. Yes.
What does that stand for?
Breastfeeding.
Oh,
Yeah. I read a lot of parenting message boards. BFing. Is your child EBF? E for exclusively. It actually doesn't matter. Good questions. Okay, so those are hormones that the hypothalamus makes. It then sends them to posterior pituitary, and that's where oxytocin and ADH get into the bloodstream. So they are made in the hypothalamus, they are released by posterior pituitary, they go into the bloodstream, they do their thing on target cells. The other hormones that the hypothalamus makes are tropic, and there's lots of them. And we'll look at some selected ones. Okay, so there are other hormones that the hypothalamus makes, and they're called releasing hormones. The releasing hormones are made here. They're sent to anterior. What's anterior mean? The front part of your pituitary. It's got two lobes, the front, the back, the anterior, the posterior. The releasing hormones are sent to the anterior pituitary. Then they go into the bloodstream. That's where they get into the bloodstream, is at the anterior pituitary. And the releasing hormones cause anterior pituitary to make tropic hormones. So releasing hormones are made in the hypothalamus, they're sent to anterior pituitary, and they tell anterior pituitary to make other tropic hormones. Does that make sense?
So you said made in the hypothalamus and then sent to the anterior,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just tells them to make the hormones?
Yeah. These releasing hormones tell anterior pituitary to make other tropic hormones. So here's a question, and this relates to some stuff. Question is coming up.
So are you saying that the releasing hormone is sent to the anterior?
Yes. Okay, here's a picture that helps explain this some. And this needs a lot of context. So this is a bloodstream. So this red bar represents bloodstream. This red bar also represents bloodstream. And the top row, it says hormones from the hypothalamus. And notice in their names, growth hormone, releasing hormone, prolactin, releasing factor, prolactin release, inhibiting hormone. They all have, except for this one, releasing in their name. So what this means is the hypothalamus makes that set, and it sends them into the bloodstream, and they get to the anterior pituitary. And then these arrows coming down, that means that like prolactin releasing factor, once it's in the anterior pituitary, results in production of prolactin, which is another breastfeeding hormone, just as an example. And then prolactin releasing factor leaves anterior pituitary, and then this row, right here on this row, this is actual target organs. Target organs. Or like where the end result of all these hormones are acting, is on the target organs. This has a ton of information, and this is not a slide that you need to memorize except for this row, or this column right here, and this column right here, and we'll be going through those in some detail. So let's look here with growth hormone. What are the target organs of growth hormone actually? You said something in bones.
Growth plate.
Growth plate in bones, which they're just saying here bone. It is the growth plate in bone. What else does it act on?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what are the actual target organs of growth hormone, according to this? Muscle, adipose, which is what? Yeah. So growth hormone actually has receptors in bone, muscle, fat, and it causes growth and division of all those tissues. It causes them to grow. Those are its targets. What does it take to get growth hormone to be produced in the first place, according to this?
The releasing GHRH.
GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, gets growth hormone to be produced, which then causes growth. So the girl, what was that girl's name? I don't know. What? Sabrina, that's right. Where, she doesn't make enough growth hormone. Where might her actual problem be? It might be in the hypothalamus. Where else could it be? Say that again? She might not have receptors. That could be it. She might have a problem actually in her pituitary. They didn't say that in the video, but it's not, something's wrong. She's not making enough growth hormone. Let's give her some extra for $20,000 a year so that her bones, muscles, and fat tissue can grow more. So she might have a problem anywhere back here. Yeah.
So it wouldn't be like that her bones already osteoblast? Because if that was the case, then she wouldn't be able to grow.
Yeah, if her bones didn't have osteoblasts, they probably wouldn't form properly in the first place. So that would have been the kind of thing let's check what's wrong with her that she's not growing. Turned out not to be that. It was a growth hormone type of problem. If you've got this slide to write on, draw a circle around this column here, and draw a circle around this column here, but not somatostatin. You leave out somatostatin. But those columns are things that I want you to know in detail. And up there where it says ALA1, that means that we're going to do something in lab as groups to work on this concept tomorrow. So it'd be useful to bring this slide with you tomorrow for that. Okay, here's the question I was trying to get to. Are releasing hormones tropic? Why or why not? I'm going to go back to, so that's the question. Are releasing hormones tropic? Why or why not? And how do you know?
I would say no, because I don't think the same thing.
Do you think individually you can discuss?
Well, no, because let me just try to.
Oh, wait, a few.
So if you look at the right corner, GNRH,
Tropic.
if it was it's tropic, if it was not tropic, then your GNRH would be about 2. Because it won't change, it just produces metabolites.
10 more seconds. Are releasing hormones tropic? Raise your hand if you think they are tropic. Raise your hand if you think they are not tropic. They are. Who raised a hand? Everybody's Justin, why are they tropic?
Because they control the production of a second hormone.
Yeah. So they control production of other hormones. And those other hormones may also be tropic, but releasing hormones by definition are tropic. Useful fact. Okay, so what we're doing now, sometimes there will be a not obvious connection between a figure on one slide and a figure on another slide. So this concept connects to this other complicated picture. Yeah, okay. this column here is connected to this slide. So it's talking about, in the end, what does it take to get us to make growth hormone and for it to do what it's supposed to do? It's called hormone cascade. You can think of hormone cascade as like a domino effect. Like before you can have growth hormone, you have to have growth hormone releasing hormone. Something had to come before that. So a lot of hormones, we don't just make it directly. There's like a sequence of hormones for you to be able to produce that one. And growth hormone is one of those. So this is showing, like generically, what are the segments of a hormone cascade and where does it start? What location of the body is the beginning of this process? Hypothalamus, master regulator. So the hypothalamus is sending something to the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary is sending something to a peripheral endocrine gland. What's peripheral? Did you say outside? Like on the edge, or not the central, the peripheral one, somewhere out in the body. One of the other endocrine glands. And then that one will make a hormone that affects target cells, and the target cells will do something, and that's the action. Target cells do blank. So this cascade, you can put any hormone process onto it and match the parts. And this side of the figure is putting, for growth hormone, match the hormone or target cell with this sequence of the hormone cascade. This would also be something to study very hard before our first exam. So, end result, what's the end result of this hormone cascade? Growth in the target cells, which are bones, muscle, and adipose, and they're going to grow bigger. That's the end result. Growth hormone is kind of in the middle of this. Where's growth hormone actually made? It requires the hypothalamus involvement, but it's made in the anterior pituitary. That's the tricky part. So two hormones are required. You have to have the releasing hormone first, made in the hypothalamus. That one controls anterior pituitary making growth hormone. Growth hormone does its thing on the target cells. Is growth hormone tropic?
No.
No, not according to this. And it's not. Is growth hormone releasing hormone tropic?
Yes.
It is, because that one's required to get this one made. What questions do you have about this so far? Yeah.
Can you go over again how, I know you just close slide, but can you go over again how it goes from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland?
Let's look with pictures, which is helpful. Okay, let's take, I'll try to write up high. Let's take this picture and draw on it for growth hormone. What's going on? Okay, so I'm going to write as high as I can, but I want you to pretend that it's even higher up in the hypothalamus.
And where's the hypothalamus?
Are you trying to make me jump for that?
Oh, those little two bugs right there?
I actually have a telescoping antenna thing. I just need to put it in my bag. There's hypothalamus. So pretend I am writing up there GH, RH, growth hormone releasing hormone, up there in that spot. And that travels down to anterior pituitary. And anterior pituitary makes GH, growth hormone, and growth hormone leaves in the bloodstream, and it's going to go all over the body in the bloodstream, and it's going to meet a lot of cells. What kind of cells does it not act on?
Cells that don't associate with bone muscles or
Yeah, things that aren't bones, muscles, or fat. So when it comes, comes past an eyeball cell, nothing happens there. Nothing happens there. But when it comes to bones, muscles, fat, what's special about those that makes it act on them? They've got the receptor. You must have watched the video. Did you watch the video from last time?
Yeah.
How bad was it visually?
That's
Okay, good. Yeah. So your project in lab tomorrow is to take this kind of process and look at it for thyroid hormone and make a big model with your group to show what's moving where and how is all this connected together. And that's part of your lab work tomorrow. And for your exam 1 in lecture, you need to know all the details for growth hormone cascade and thyroid hormone cascade. Here's some other.
Is that the that cascade is the only one to know? This one? What you just said.
Few other things that I haven't said yet. I hesitate to ever say blank is all you need to know.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the most important. The most important part of this lecture is the growth hormone stuff. The next things that I'm going to say are relevant to all hormones, not just growth hormone. So we're going back kind of to general characteristics of hormones. And hormones, you talked about negative feedback before sometime, like when the level builds up, it goes back and it makes less of its own release. So hormones generally do negative feedback so that their levels don't just rise and rise and rise. That's what this is showing. This is not a key figure, but it's an interesting figure. And because hormones are controlled generally by negative feedback, they tend to stay in certain levels. Like they might go up a little bit and then come down a little bit, but they're not drastically swinging in range usually. They're staying around a certain level. So if you go and get a blood test for your EPO levels because you're a cyclist, any of you a cyclist? Hey. Like that's a thing that sometimes cyclists get tested for. It's supposed to be in a certain range, and if you're down here, they're probably not testing you because you probably can't be a good cyclist, honestly. If your level is up at the ceiling, what do they think? You've been doping EPO. Like, for other things it would be a steroid, but you've been cheating because it's supposed to be in this level right here. So we kind of have acceptable levels of hormones, and they go up and they come down some, but they're going to stay around a certain range that is considered normal.
like you got like superior athletes, like those who are like NFL players, NBA players, and Major League players. So like since those are like superior athletes, could we assume that their hormone growth is like superior to ours? Like their composition of their body is just
There are a
better
lot
than
of
ours?
things that could make someone a superior athlete. There are physical things that give them the chance to be.
Yeah, besides like
Yeah, so they may, I mean, there's a lot to go into it. If you're talking about size, like for offensive line or something like that, I mean, you can look at a third grade class and pick out who might be able to be an offensive lineman. And then you gotta learn the schemes, and then you gotta train, you gotta eat well. But like your really, really good athletes, they probably do have some like physical body
like LeBron
thing
James.
that made them that way. Probably got every possible thing. Yeah, but there's a lot that go into it. But you might expect people who are fantastic weightlifters that maybe they might have been on the upper end of growth hormone level, naturally. Yeah. How would you know? How would you know like what normal hormone levels are.
That's
How do
what
you
I
even
was
know
gonna
that?
ask.
What do you base it on?
Average man.
Average?
An average person.
Like you would have to get data from a lot of people, and then you figure out the average, like statistically. Yeah. That would require testing a lot of people, and that's already been done in the past, and that's how you kind of know what's the average. Did you have this picture in your book? Yeah? Maybe it depends on the edition. This is all the same woman, and this woman, starting as a girl, she had excess growth hormone over her life, and it made bones, muscles, and adipose tissue, but bones grew too much over her whole life. So like normally your bones would stop growing like around this age, right? For her, it just kept on. And so it led to a masculinized appearance. It was over effect of growth hormone lasting too long, or I don't know if she had too many receptors, but excess growth hormone. What does insufficient growth hormone look like? The little girl. I mean, insufficient. Dwarfism is something different, surprisingly. It's not a
So
hormone.
does that mean, like, if you just took a random person and gave them like a lot of growth hormone, they could theoretically become the world's biggest man? Or do they have to have, you know?
It would depend
receptors as
some
well?
on when you gave it to them and what their genetic bone length was going to be. It depends on a lot of things. But it would make people bigger in general. Good questions. I'm going to switch slide sets, and while I'm doing that, I'm turning the video off and on. So it makes it a little